Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Naruto ate the Ope Ope no Mi and harem with Mabui Tenten? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the HaretaSora for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Tsunade tried to ease her erratically beating heart, while she rushed towards where she last saw Gamabunta fighting the Kyuubi before both it and the large toad seemed to disappear. Fear was coursing through her veins as she almost knew what she would find once she got to Kushina and Minato. She cursed mentally as she had let her phobia of blood stop her from being there to help deliver the child that was to be her godson, and possibly endanger both him and his parents. Her eyes widened while she felt her heart drop to her stomach once her eyes landed on the sight of Kushina with a large gaping hole in her stomach. It only dropped deeper down as she saw a dead Minato hugging her from behind while a crying baby was held in her arms. Kushina, oh God, I can try and help you. I won't let you die, she stuttered out as she shakily walked towards her, tears building up in the corners of her eyes. Despite all of this, she forced herself not to be affected by the sight of blood or the fear she could feel from it. Tsunade, I can no you can't though, I am glad you made it, Kushina strained out as Tsunade crouched down to Kushina's side and was shakily handed the small baby in Kushina's arms. I can use my creation rebirth and pump it into you. I don't care if I die from it. Your baby needs his mother. Tsunade cried out before Kushina silenced her by her weak hand cupping her cheek. Quiet Tsunade, I am too far gone. Please just listen to me, Kushina weakly said as Tsunade nodded weakly. She could see Kushina barely staying alive through sheer willpower while she held the now sleeping baby closer to her. Please look after Naruto for me and Minato. Love him for us and allow him into your heart, she said as she shakily moved her hand down to Naruto's head. Kushina, I don't know if can be a mother. I know I was your choice as godmother due to me being your sensei in the past, but I lost Dan and Iwaki. What if I lose Naruto? She whispered out as Kushina let out a laugh, though it was more coughs than laughs. I know you can do this, Tsunade. Why you won't lose him? I chose Yu as his godmother because I saw that Yu could if anything happened to us. Don't let the village use him as a weapon. Protect him and love him for the both of us, she said before she smiled at her and turned her attention down towards the now quiet baby. I love you, Naruto, my precious baby, Kushina said with a weak but happy smile as her eyes finally closed and her chest stopped moving, her hands still on the sleeping baby's head. Tsunade honestly couldn't hold her tears in any longer. I'll try my best, Kushina. I promise I will look after Naruto and try my best to be a mother to him, Tsunade thought as she gently took Kushina's hand off Naruto, giving it one last squeeze before she stood up just as her sensei and a squad of ANBU appeared behind her. Tsunade, I didn't expect you to be here. I thought you were back with Shizen, Hiruzen said with a frown as he noticed the scene before him. She's safe back in Konoha near the Senju compound. I should get back to her, she said as Hiruzen pointed towards the sleeping Naruto in her arms. Is that who I think is, and is he what I think he is? He asked as Tsunade narrowed her eyes. His name is Naruto, and yes he is, but as his godmother, if you think I'm going to allow him to be used as a weapon because of it, then you have another thing coming, sensei, she growled out before Hiruzen frowned and sighed. I understand, but we still need you and him present for the council meeting before you leave, he said, and while Tsunade wanted to object, the look on her sensei's face told her this wasn't a request. Plus, as an active ninja and Sannin, she didn't have room to argue. Fine. Send A and B when you need us, she said bluntly before she started to walk back towards Konoha, holding the sleeping Naruto close to her. She didn't slow down as she speed walked through the forest, unable to jump, but made sure that his blue blanket wrapped around him to protect him from the cold wind. It surprisingly didn't take her long to return to Konoha. She moderately chalked it up to her being so focused on everything she would need to raise and take care of the little baby that slept calmly in her arms and against her chest. She was brought out of her thoughts as she heard a familiar voice calling out to her. Lady Tsunade! Lady Tsunade! Thank goodness you are all right. Shizen, her 14-year-old student and the niece of her dead lover, said as she rushed up to her before stopping and looking wide-eyed at the baby in her arms. Is that Dash? She asked before Tsunade nodded, stopping her question midway through. Yes, it is Kushina and Minato's son. His name is Naruto. Now, because of a terrible tragedy, I am taking up my role as godmother to raise him sooner than I ever expected, she said with a frown as Shizen, who was rather close to Kushina, who she saw as an aunt or even a sister, teared up but nodded. Well, we better get him inside and cleaned up, shouldn't we? The young girl asked as she turned away, most likely to hide the tears heard in her voice. Tsunade didn't waste any time wrapping Shizen in a one-armed hug which she quickly returned, while minding the sleeping baby cradled in her other arm. Sure, it'll be okay, but right now we have to look after little Naruto here, she said as Shizen nodded and stepped back, wiping the tears from her eyes. Yes, you are right, Lady Tsunade. I'll go and look for a cradle and some blankets for him, Shizen quickly said as she hurried back into the compound with Tsunade slowly behind her. I will have to leave soon with Naruto for a council meeting with Hiruzen, so get everything ready for Naruto and pack our things as I plan to leave tomorrow by noon latest, she said as Shizen nodded. Understood, Lady Tsunade. I'll get our things ready, her student said before she rushed off to look through some of the large Senju compound. Tsunade though couldn't help but sigh softly before a slight smile grew on her lips as the still sleeping Naruto nuzzled against her chest more, seeking out any warmth nearby to him. She wouldn't consider herself fully into the thought of being his mom so quickly, but Kushina trusted her and, with her last breaths, asked her to care for him, so she was determined to protect him and try her best. Though the sight of a rather adorable baby nuzzling against her for warmth was enough to stir something in her chest, as much as she wouldn't admit it. Lady Tsunade, I found a cradle and some blankets for him, Shizen said as she poked her head out from the main living room of the building they had been staying in for the last few months. Tsunade, shaking off the odd feeling in her chest, walked into the room to see the small wooden cradle on the floor that was just the right size for Naruto. Great timing, as I think I can sense you coming our way, Tsunade said with an annoyed sigh as she accepted the blankets from Shizen to wrap Naruto and more. Just as she was about to pick up the small wooden cradle, 3 Anbu bearing a tiger, dragon, and boar mask appeared behind them, silent as ever. Did Sensei get the council put together that quickly? She asked as the dragon Anbu nodded. Well, I shouldn't be surprised since he does have a way of gathering people quickly when it is needed, she said as she pointed to the cradle. One of you carry that back with us so I don't have to hold him the whole time, as I have a feeling I might have to punch or threaten someone, she growled out slightly before the tiger Anbu picked up the cradle and the others motioned for her to follow. Shizen, you stay here and continue packing. Hopefully this shouldn't take long, she said as Shizen nodded and went back to packing while Tsunade followed the Anbu out of the compound and towards the Hokage building. As they entered the Hokage's chamber, she had to struggle not to glare at Danzo as he sat in the middle of the elders, Hamura Mitokado and Kohara Yutane on one side of the table. The other side was all of Konoha's dominant clan heads as Heishi Hyuga, Fugaku Uchiha, Inochi Yamanaka, Choza Akimichi, Shikaku Nara, Shibi Aburame, and some Inuzuka all sat together. And of course at the head of the table was her sensei, Hiruzen Sarutobi, back in his Hokage garb, which told her he had taken back up the mantle of Hokage after Minato's death. She didn't mind that since she'd rather have him back in power than allow someone like Danzo to slip into power. Tsunade, sorry to call you so soon after everything, but with you planning to leave as soon as possible, this meeting had to be called. Hiruzen frowned as she shrugged her shoulders, directing the Anbu where to set the cradle in the room. Whatever, just let's make this quick since I have a lot to figure out and plan because of this little guy, she said as she gently set Naruto down in the cradle, making sure he was safely wrapped up and warm. I'm sorry, Tsunade, but I don't believe it is best for the village if you take our Jinchuriki from the village. Danzo quickly seemed to chime in as the other elders, who were basically his parrots that went along with whatever he said, nodded alongside him. Well, I'm sorry, but as his godmother and closest living relative, seeing as my grandmother was Mito Uzumaki, I don't believe you have say over what I do with my godson, Tsunade growled out as Hiruzen quickly cleared his throat to stop the two from starting any arguments. Wait, the little guy over there is actually the new Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi? Sim said in shock, since to place a burden like that on a newborn baby was a bit much. I figure it was the only way for Minato to subdue the Kyuubi, as it is nigh impossible to kill a Bijou. And it goes without saying that this bit of info is an S-rank secret, and not to be repeated under any means unless with my approval, Hiruzen said, ending with a very serious tone that left for no argument as the others nodded. Look, Sensei, Kushina tasked me with the job of godmother. Hell, she told me with her last breath to do it. I don't care if I am labeled a missing nin for leaving with him, I will raise him and I won't do it here, she said as she slammed her hands on the table and stared her sensei dead in the eyes. There is no need to go that far, Tsunade. No one is going to label you as a missing nin, he said, a small barely visible smirk on his face, as he watched the shocked looks on the elders while a few of the clan heads frowned slightly. Hiruzen, you can't be serious. If our village loses our Jinchuriki, it will greatly weaken our village, Kohara said as Hiruzen sighed. Really, and how is a little newborn baby going to keep our village strong right now? What better person to train him than his godmother, who is a Sannin? He asked Koharu, who frowned, before he turned to Tsunade. Which is why I will let Tsunade take Naruto to raise him how she sees fit, but there are 2 conditions, he said as Tsunade knew there was always a catch. And these conditions are? She asked with a frown before Hiruzen held up one finger. First is that you will train him as you see fit, and by the time he reaches 16, when he would graduate the academy, you bring him back to Konoha. This does not mean you have to train him, but knowing you'll want him to at least be able to defend himself, he said as Tsunade frowned. Do we really have to return to the village? She asked as Hiruzen sighed. Yes, I would think his parents would want him to have some ties to the village at least, he said as she groaned but nodded as she was in no place to argue right now. Fine, whatever. What is the second condition? She asked as her sensei chuckled and held up a second finger. You must keep in constant contact with either myself or Jiraiya, who I will send from time to time to check in on you, Naruto, and his seal, he said as Hamura stood up, slamming a hand on the table. Hiruzen, you honestly can't be considering letting Tsunade, who has a problem with drinking and gambling, to raise a child, let alone our Jinchuriki. He yelled in outrage as Tsunade slammed her hand down on the table, creating a rather large crack through the middle from the force of it and the strength behind it. I believe I can raise a child since I am a world-renowned medic. Plus, I'll have you know, since living here for the last few months I have gotten my drinking and gambling in check, so how about you shut up about what you don't know, she growled as Shikaka sighed. How troublesome. Just let the woman take the kid as the benefits outweigh any downsides I can see. In the end we get a possible shinobi trained by a Sannin. If Jiraiya's last student became a Hokage and her current student is shaping to be a skillful medic, imagine how serious she will be training her godchild, Shikaka said as he sighed, crossed his arms, and leaned back in his chair. I have to agree with Shikaka here, as I do not see a large enough downside to make any objections to this. Especially since he will be returning at 16, Shibi Aburame said as he adjusted his sunglasses. I still object to this. We need to make our Jinchuriki strong enough to defend themselves, as I doubt he will be if he is trained to be solely a medic. If anyone is to raise and train a child, I would best be someone who can ensure he will be powerful, Danzo said, narrowing his lone eye ever so slightly towards Tsunade. You may object all you want, Danzo, but I approve of this and have the utmost faith that Tsunade will protect and care for him. Plus, this will be a great opportunity for Naruto to see more of the Land of Fire and grow compared to just being stuck in the village, Hiruzen said as Tsunade grew a smile on her face from her sensei's words. So I am free leave with the kid tomorrow? She asked as Hiruzen nodded. Yes, but do come with me to my office, as I have some things I would like to give to you privately, and this was the final topic of the meeting. He said before Tsunade nodded, already expecting her sensei to have things prepared for her, as he was the kind of man to think fast and get things set up even faster, even in his old age. You all know what is needed to fix up the village. If there are any troubles, please contact me, Hiruzen said as the shinobi clan heads nodded before disappearing via Shunshin, and the elders just slowly got up and walked off, though Danzo had a thinly veiled glare directed towards her and Naruto. Or can you carefully carry Naruto and follow Tsunade and me to my office? Hiruzen asked as the ANBU nodded and very carefully picked up the cradle before walking off beside them up to his office. Please set Naruto down and return to your post, he said as the ANBU nodded, setting the cradle down next to Tsunade's chair and disappeared via Shunshin. Hiruzen could only sigh with a sad frown as he looked down at the sleeping baby in the cradle. For Minato and Kushina to die so quickly after little Naruto was born is a tragedy. I do not know who could have possibly released the Kyuubi from Kushina, but I will find out, Hiruzen said, his eyes filled with a fury Tsunade had seen very rarely, and it always ended with someone gravely injured or dead. Do you have any idea who could have possibly done it? Tsunade asked as she sat down in the chair next to Naruto, slowly rocking the cradle while she watched her sensei sit down behind his desk. The only ones possible to control a Bijou and pull it out is an Uchiha, but my gut, and everything I have seen and felt tells me it isn't an Uchiha in the village, Hiruzen said as Tsunade nodded along, trusting her sensei's judgment, since he wasn't called the professor for nothing. Well, that just breeds more trouble, she said with a frown as Hiruzen nodded but waved it off. I can look into it more in depth later, though right now I have some things to give you, some things Minato and Kushina left behind for either you or Jiraiya should one of you take up your mantle of godparent, he said as he inserted a small glass cylinder into a drawer, making it pop open, before putting the 2 scrolls inside on top of the desk. This is the bank documents for Kushina and Minato's account, totaling in enough Ryo to take care of you, him, and Shizen for the foreseeable future. Kushina had a sizable fortune that her family gave her before sending her over, and Minato saved up a lot while working as Hokage, he said as he handed it over to Tsunade. Well, that solves the expenses needed to raise a baby right off the bat, Tsunade said as she was thankful for it, since while she might not be in debt from gambling anymore, that didn't mean she had that big of a fortune to keep her and Shizen afloat, let alone a baby as well. Hiruzen couldn't help but chuckle a bit at his student's comment before picking up the second one. This though is empty. Kushina instructed me to tell whichever godparent that accepted the role to seal up every weapon and scroll in their house and to use this, he said as he put a small vial of blood up on the desk, to unlock the house as it is locked by an immensely strong blood seal, he said as Tsunade frowned but accepted the empty scroll and the vial of blood, even though the latter made her moderately sick. Will this thing seriously be able to hold everything in it? She asked as she wasn't too well versed in seals, as the extent of her knowledge of the topic extended to her seal on her forehead. Minato made sure of it. It might look small, but it has the storage strength and capacity of the high-quality larger scrolls. It is also only able to be opened and sealed by Naruto and one other person that I add to the seal matrix, which I have already done for you. Hiruzen added as Tsunade let out an impressed whistle as she looked over the scroll. Minato really went all out with this, didn't he? She said as Hiruzen chuckled. Well, he did want everything of both his and Kushina's put in there, both weapon and technique scrolls, for their son. You can give the contents of it to him, when he eventually becomes either a genin or chunin depending on your call, Hiruzen said as Tsunade nodded understandingly before slipping the items into her pockets. I'll be sure to go and seal up everything after I get the little guy back to my compound where Shizen can watch over him for a bit, she said while Hiruzen nodded. I am surprised you are so quick to take the role of godmother, even if it was somewhat forced by Kushina's last wish. Does this mean you are welcoming the role as godmother and mother? He asked as Tsunade sighed and frowned. No, in fact I'm terrified, Tsunade said as she clenched her fists and stared down at the sleeping baby beside her. I'm afraid I won't be a well enough mother to him, or that you might lose him like you did Dan and Iwaki. Hiruzen finished for her as the sight of her fists clenching tighter was an answer on its own. Tsunade, Kushina trusted you before her death, and she had faith in you until her death. You are stronger and wiser now. With every loss we suffer, it makes us stronger in its own way. Today I lost my dear wife Biwako by the hands of the one who led to the deaths of Naruto's parents. He said as Tsunade's eyes widened at the death of her sensei's wife, a woman that had been like another mother to her. But I will not allow her death to weaken me, Tsunade. It will only strengthen my drive to protect those closest to me and grow stronger to make sure I can protect them. Please, I believe in you, Tsunade, so believe in yourself, her sensei said with such a caring tone that she couldn't bring herself to look him in the face, or else she knew she would possibly start to cry again. I'll try my best, sensei. I really will, she said as he chuckled. That is all I can ask, Tsunade, and remember you aren't alone. You have me, Jiraiya, Shizen, and now Naruto standing beside you when he can, he said, smiling as he heard Tsunade chuckle with a smile of her own on her face while she crouched down beside the cradle. I know, she said with a soft sigh before picking Naruto up out of his cradle, careful not to wake him as she adjusted him in her arms. I really better get the little guy back as he is bound to be hungry soon, and I still have to figure that out. Plus the whole packing my stuff and his stuff to leave tomorrow is going to be a chore, she said as Hiruzen nodded and motioned for an ANBU to appear. Go take the cradle back to the Senju compound main building for Tsunade, please, as she has to carry Naruto, he said as the ANBU nodded and disappeared with the cradle before he turned back to Tsunade. Do let me know if I can help in any way. I know I am going to be busy tomorrow with the full aftermath of the attack, but I always have time for my students, he added as Tsunade smiled and nodded before walking towards the door. I know, sensei. Thanks again as always, she said as she and Naruto left. As much as she liked talking with her sensei, she had a lot of stuff to do before daybreak, and she needed to get started so she could at least get some sleep in before they left. Come on, little guy, let's get you in a bassinet, or something for the night, she said in a soft whisper as the small baby in her arms nuzzled closer to her for warmth. Next day. Tsunade sighed as she watched Shizen carry the happily babbling Naruto in her arms while she carried the large storage scroll that they had fit everything of theirs as well as the one scroll that held everything of Naruto's from his parents' house in it. Thankfully, they had been able to get everything packed and get him fed with enough time to let them get a good night's sleep. Thankfully, Naruto seemed to be a heavy sleeper after getting a full meal in him. Though to feed Naruto she had to somewhat modify her body a bit with a medical technique she had learnt back when she was with Dan for the case of if ever they had kids and she couldn't naturally produce milk. Originally it was a technique made for maids or mothers who adopted so they could still feed the children they cared for or adopted. She knew she had to do it for Naruto considering he was a newborn and formula was something she wanted to get him on eventually. "Are you okay, Lady Tsunade? If you want to rest more I can look after Naruto for you after we find an inn," Shizen said as she shook her head. "No, I'm fine. We really need to keep moving so we can reach the town I have planned for us to stay in for a while and get settled down before it gets too late," she said as they had left Konoha an hour or two ago, after a farewell from a shadow clone of her sensei. Something she understood since the whole village was hectic to repair and recover, meaning the Hokage was even busier. They continued through the forests of the Land of Fire towards the village she had in mind until she started to notice Naruto's fussing in Shizen's arms. "Naru-chan? What's wrong? You don't need a diaper, and you were just sleeping," Shizen said confused as Tsunade chuckled and gently took the fussing baby from her student's arms. "Relax, Shizen, the little guy is just hungry. Isn't that right, Naruto?" she asked in a baby voice as she rubbed his cheek, settling him down in one arm as she used the other to uncover her breast from her gray top. She wasn't too worried about others seeing as she couldn't sense anyone nearby. She did though chuckle at her student's embarrassed and nervous look as Shizen looked away. "Ah, relax, Shizen, it's a perfectly natural thing. No need to get embarrassed," she teased as Shizen only got redder. It's not that. It's just the size," Shizen mumbled as she stared down at her own still developing chest as she was only 14. "Oh, well, don't let it get you down. I was roughly the same size as you when I was your age. It wasn't until I was around my late 20s or so when I really bloomed," she said as she noticed a look of hope in Shizen's eyes that made her laugh a bit before Shizen looked over at her. "So how does it feel? Does it hurt?" Shizen asked as her curiosity got the better of her. "It feels weird but doesn't hurt, especially since the little guy doesn't have any teeth. He does definitely drink a lot though," she said with a chuckle as Shizen nodded while they continued walking. By the time they had reached the town Tsunade had set up for them to stay in, which had taken a few hours, Naruto had finished eating and gone back to sleep in Shizen's arms as all newborns did, mostly was eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom. Thankfully he wasn't messy when it came to the last part. "So why did you choose this town for us to stay in, Lady Tsunade?" Shizen asked as Tsunade unlocked the large house in front of them. "Well, it's a good distance away from Konoha so we don't have to worry about the bothering us, and this is one of the Senju compounds that were set up long before Konoha was formed, so it's a rent-free house. And it, like the others around the Land of Fire, have been locked so others can't enter them, though it's not like there is anything of value in them," Tsunade said as she pushed open the gates to reveal the slightly dusty insides. "We might have to do some cleaning before we bring Naru-chan inside," Shizen said as the dust was quite thick. "I'll make some shadow clones to do it. For now let's go out to the courtyard and maybe start unpacking there," Tsunade said as Shizen shielded the sleeping Naruto's mouth from breathing in the dust while they walked through the house and out into the inner courtyard. "Well, this house looks very nice and large. How long will we be staying here?" Shizen asked as she watched the shadow clones of her sensei go through and clean up the house while they unpacked the boxes of their stuff. "Well, with a baby I don't want to move around all that much, so for the foreseeable future we will be staying here and settling down. After we unpack we can go to the market and stock up on some food and set up our account," she said as she crouched down, smiling down and fluttering her fingers at a giggling Naruto that laid in a cradle next to them. "I want to give him a moderately stable upbringing, Shizen, so let's get comfy here," she said as Shizen smiled and nodded before they continued unpacking their things, looking forward to their life in this nice little town. A month later. Tsunade smiled softly as she gently rocked Naruto's cradle, lulling him to sleep while he hugged on a little slug-stuffed animal she had bought him. She let out a tired groan, straightening her sore back and rubbing her shoulders as had just finished up her report to her sensei as per their agreement. "Here you go, Katsuya, you can now take this to sensei. Thank you for doing this for me," she said as the small portion of her main summon nodded and allowed her to slip the scroll into the pouch she had put on her. "Of course, Tsunade-sama, It is a small task to ensure you may look after Naruto-kun, Katsuyu said as she looked down at Naruto from on top of the short desk. Tsunade used focus on work and Naruto at the same time. He is an adorable child. Do you plan to have him sign the slug summoning contract? Katsuyu asked as Tsunade frowned and rubbed her forehead. I don't know, Katsuyu. Sensei said I have a choice whether or not to train him, but a part of me wants to and doesn't want to. I want him to be able to defend himself, but another is scared he'll end up like the others, she said as Katsuyu knew she meant Dan and Iwaki. I understand, and whatever decision you decide, I'm sure it will be for the best. After all, I think raising him will awaken your mother's intuition, Katsuyu teased before disappearing in a puff of smoke, leaving behind a grumbling Tsunade. Her grumbles stopped as she narrowed her eyes in anger, sensing 3 chakra sources heading their way that were trying their best to stay hidden. Though with her level of sensing, the only one she figured could slip by her senses were either Orochimaru for sure, and possibly Jiraiya if he was actually being serious. Acting as fast as she could without waking Naruto, she carried the sleeping baby out of the room and towards his room, which, thanks to Jiraiya sending some seals back via Katsuyu, was the most secure room in the house. Lady Tsunade? Are you okay? Shizen asked as she entered the room to see her student cleaning up Naruto's room a bit. Stay here with Naruto. I think I feel some pests heading our way, she said as Shizen frowned but accepted a sleeping Naruto into her arms. Do you need my help? Shizen asked as she shook her head, putting a paper tag on Naruto's forehead, which harmlessly absorbed a very small bit of chakra, before pulling it off him. You look after him while I use this to lure them out, Tsunade said as she headed out of the room before stopping and looking back at them. If anyone slips by me to you, then you know what to do, she added as Shizen nodded, gaining a nervous but serious look. Oh, of course, Lady Tsunade, her student said before Tsunade grabbed one of Naruto's extra teddy bears and blankets before she closed the door behind her. She continued heading out towards the courtyard as she felt Shizen activate the security seals on the room before deciding to wait for whoever were clearly heading their way through the back of the large compound. She quickly slapped the tag on the bear before wrapping it in a blanket in hopes to fool those coming. Thankfully, she was able to do it just in time as the next second 3 ANBU, clad in dark cloaks, appeared across her in the courtyard. Immediately she knew they weren't sent by her sensei, as the long dark hooded cloaks were not regular ANBU attire. That and the blandness of their masks screamed something wrong. Tsunade Senju have orders to retrieve the child in your care from you and return them to ensure they get the proper training to be of use to the village, the center ANBU said as Tsunade narrowed her eyes, immediately aware who sent them after her. I hope Danzo knew he was sending his route to their deaths after sending them after us, Sanin. Though he'll figure that out once I send your heads back to him, and Sensei, Tsunade said before she quickly tossed the bundle towards them, causing one ANBU to leap up to catch it only for it to explode in his face and send his limp body falling back towards the ground. She didn't waste any time before she leapt towards the ANBU on the left, drawing her fists back and charging up her super strength as she seemed to have caught them off guard. She heard a somewhat sickening crunch as her fist collided with their sternum and sent them crashing into the courtyard wall, leaving a deep imprint from the force of the crash. As the last one realized the quick deaths of his 2 allies, he made a quick choice to retreat before a familiar chakra flared above them both. Summoning Art, Food Cart Destroyer. A familiar voice yelled out before a large toad appeared above the last ANBU before it crashed down, instantly killing them under the toad's immense weight. So I made it just in time, it seems, the voice said as she looked up to see Jiraiya smiling down at her before dispelling the toad and stepping to the side to avoid the dead body. I could have handled them. They were severely overwhelmed and not ready for me to attack. Guess they figured I would be on the defense considering they thought Naruto was in my arms, she said before her eyes widened. I need to check on them to make sure Naruto and Shizen are safe, she said as she wanted to make sure, absolutely 100%, that there weren't any 4th ANBU that sneaked in another way. What should I do with the bodies? Jiraiya yelled, understanding why Tsunade was rushing off like she was. Send them to Sensei. Tell him Danzo sent them, she yelled before she deactivated the security seal to see Shizen holding a crying Naruto in her arms, both completely unharmed and safe. Are they taken care of, Lady Tsunade? Shizen asked before Tsunade nodded and she handed Naruto over to her. Good, because I think Naruto-chan is hungry after being woken up by the crashes, she said as Tsunade chuckled and accepted Naruto into her arms. Of course the little guy is hungry, he just had a super long nap, didn't he? She said using her baby voice that made Naruto giggle and clap his hands happily. Oh ho ho, never have I been more jealous of a little kid, getting to suckle on those heavenly orbs. Jiraiya exclaimed behind her before she narrowed her eyes and carefully spun around and sent him flying with a punch to the face, all while supporting Naruto in her free arm. Stop being a pervert! She yelled before stopping as she heard Naruto giggle louder, which made her start laughing. Our little Naru, do you like it when I hit the pervert? You are just so adorable! She squealed a bit while she nuzzled her cheek against his. She stopped though as she heard Jiraiya get back up behind her. Did you at least send the bodies to Sensei before you came over to perv out? She asked as Jiraiya gained a serious look on his face and nodded. I sent them express delivery with the toads with a clear message. Sensei should be having some Yamanaka go through their minds and charging Danzo with whatever crime he can make stick. I'm just glad I sensed them while I was making my way over, Jiraiya said as he personally would have liked to hit that old war hawk with a raisin gun but decided Sensei would get him for both him and Tsunade. Good. I expected that man to try something but I didn't know he'd be that upfront with it, Tsunade said before looking towards Jiraiya with a raised brow. Well? Are you going to leave the room? I have to feed Naruto, she said as Jiraiya waved it off. Don't worry, please continue. Act like I'm not even here, he said before he was sent flying again by a strong kick, allowing her to close the door. Pervert, she grumbled as before calming down the giggling Naruto enough so that he could start feeding. Konoha, a few hours later. Hiruzen was beyond furious as he looked over the reports from the three attackers' minds that Jiraiya had delivered to him via toads. Danzo, you had absolutely no right to ever do any of this. Sending 3 of your root A and BU after my student, and a child is enough to have you imprisoned for treason, Hiruzen said as he glared across at his former teammate. To him, Danzo still had the cold and calm appearance, but he could see the man sweating on the inside. I did what I had to for the Vil. You don't get to decide that. You do not get to go behind my back and decide to do whatever you want. Hiruzen interrupted him as the last thing he wanted to hear was Danzo trying to weasel his way out of this. As of an hour ago, your route has been disbanded. Every base of yours, both above and underground, have been cleared and any route that resisted was captured or killed. You will be under constant watch for the foreseeable future, and your title as elder has been removed, Hiruzen said as Danzo narrowed his soul eye. You cannot do this, Hiruzen, Danzo growled out as Hiruzen glared back. I am the Hokage. I hold the final say about anything in this village with only the daimyo above my word. You should be counting your blessings. I am only putting you under severe house arrest and not executing you here and now, he said in a cold tone before motioning for his ANBU to appear. Take this man away and ensure everything is taken care of. I don't want him in front of me anymore, Hiruzen said before the ANBU nodded and guided Danzo out of the room. The elder Hokage let out a long and slow tired sigh before handing a scroll to a toad that hopped back up onto his desk after Danzo had left. Please get this back to Jiraiya. Tell him I hope he understands, but with that incident I'd feel safer with him closer to Naruto for the time being, he said as the toad nodded and disappeared in a puff of smoke. I hope this didn't upset you too much, Tsunade, but your quick actions should have proven to you how serious you are taking things. I just hope this was an isolated incident, Hiruzen thought while he lit his pipe, desperately needing it to relax after everything that had just happened. But in the end, at least Naruto was safe. 4 years later. Naruto smiled as he held his sissy's hand while they walked through the market. Over the 4 years he had grown to be a healthy height for his age while he wore a pair of blue shorts, a black shirt, and some blue sandals that his mama had picked out for him. Now Naruchan, you make sure to stay close by and hold my hand at all times. I told your mama I'd look after you and keep you safe, and you said you'd be a good boy for her and listen to me, Shizen said as he nodded with a big smile. Okay, sissy. I'll be super good, he said with a serious look on his little face that only made Shizen giggle and pat his head. That's my little guy, now let's go before all the good stuff is gone, she said before he nodded and walked alongside her with a happy smile. He enjoyed spending time with his sissy, and shopping was fun whether it be with his mama or her. Plus, whenever he went shopping with them, they gave him candy if he was a good boy. Everything was fun as he helped carry bags for his sissy before he frowned as she and everyone around him froze and they all became gray. Sissy? Are you okay? He asked in a worried tone as he set down the bags and poked his sissy on her cheek. It is okay, young boy. I merely made it so we can talk alone, a voice said before he turned around to see an old man smiling down at him with weird purple eyes and what looked like horns on his forehead. My mama told me not to talk to strangers. Can you fix my sissy? He asked with a frown, slightly moving behind his sissy to put some space between him and the old man. She has raised you really well, Naruto, better than you would have lived alone, the man said as Naruto frowned. How do you know my name, mister? He asked while the man chuckled and stroked his beard. Well, you can say I'm a friend of someone close to you, the man said, pointing towards his stomach, which made it get all warm and his head hurt a little bit. Not now, my son, let me get to what I came here for, he added before the headache disappeared. Naruto, I came here to offer you something, he said as he reached into his odd coat while crouching down and pulled out 2 scrolls, one a dark gray color and the other a soft red with red swirls, while the other hand held a small fruit. The fruit, like the scroll, was red with swirls on it. It was also the size of a strawberry, and in fact looked like one but was also the shape of a heart. What is that? Is it a strawberry? He asked as the man chuckled and looked the fruit over. I guess it does look like a strawberry, but unlike one it is much more special. This is a very special fruit I grew myself for you to eat with your mother training you in mind. Since she is a doctor, she'd be the perfect person to help you use its powers, he said as Naruto couldn't help but widen his eyes. Powers? He asked as the man smirked and nodded. Yeah. Powers that will help you protect those special to you. You can keep your mother and sister and uncle safe as well as those you meet in the future, he said while Naruto frowned, contemplating eating the small fruit. Take it, a deep voice spoke before Naruto looked around erratically. Who said that? He asked nervously before the old man smiled softly. Thank you, my son. I do hope you'll help this boy, as he is going to be the one I told you and your siblings about, he said before Naruto frowned and felt another warm feeling in his stomach. Take it, Naruto, this man can be trusted, I promise, and I'll explain who I am later. If he is showing up, then this is something serious, the same voice spoke, only much quieter and calmer. Naruto wasn't sure, but something about the voice made him nod and step out behind his frozen sissy. Okay, mister, but will the fruit taste good? He asked as he took the scrolls from the man's one hand, slipping them in his pockets before the man handed him the small fruit. You just need to eat everything of it up to the stem. Leave a bit behind so you can show it to your mother, the man said as Naruto nodded and accepted the fruit into his hand. Okay, but what is your name, mister? He asked before the man stood up just as Naruto bit into the now gross-tasting fruit. Hagoromo Otsutsuki, he said just as Naruto started to pass out and fall backwards. Use that power well, my young boy. I know you will change things in this world for the better, and my son will help you do so, he finished before his form faded and time started again. Tsunade let out a calm sigh as she relaxed in the living room, since with Shizen and Naruto out of the house she could take a little breather. Being a mom, despite her first thoughts, wasn't as tiresome or exhausting as she was expecting. Thinking back, she figured the time she fully accepted the role and term as mother was when Naruto first called her mama. Even just remember that scene brought a smile and happy tears to the corners of her eyes. Flashback. Tsunade let out a chuckle as she set a 6-month-old Naruto down in his high chair, as she found he enjoyed eating with them at the table. Shizen, can you keep an eye on him while I get his food ready? Tsunade asked as her student nodded and scooted her chair next to Naruto's high chair, as they had both found out he got rather fussy when Tsunade went too far away while he was in his chair. I'll keep his attention, Lady Tsunade, Shizen said as she held up his little slug plushie that instantly got his attention in the form of trying to reach out to grab it. Now you are going to be good boy for your mommy, aren't you? She asked little Naruto as he giggled and clapped his hands. Mama! Naruto cooed out as he turned around, trying to look towards Tsunade. The second the words left Naruto's mouth, both Shizen and Tsunade froze before Tsunade quickly rushed over next to Naruto to see him smiling up at her and grabbing for her, asking to be held. Did he just say what I think he did? Tsunade asked as Naruto tilted his head in slight confusion and tried to make his little hands reach her. Mama? Naruto asked as Tsunade was frozen solid before a strong warmth grew in her chest, and she just felt something click or fall into place. She smiled as she gently picked him up from his chair and held him close to her, the smile growing as he patted his tiny hands against her cheeks with his little giggle. She couldn't stop the tears as they poured down her face as Shizen watched with matching tears. For these last 6 months she only felt a terrible feeling in her gut every time anyone referred to her as Naruto's mother, fearing that each time it would endanger Naruto more. That or it gave her the feeling like she had stolen Kushina's role from her despite being asked by Kushina to raise Naruto. Yes, I'm your mama, she whispered as she no longer felt a pang of guilt associated with the word. Flashback end. Ever since then she had basically taken up the role as mom even more so, and so far hasn't regret a single moment of it. She honestly loved Naruto like he was her own. Of course, due to her past, this made her somewhat of an overprotective mother. Though not like anyone could blame her. She frowned, sipping at her sake, as she was a bit nervous about Shizen and Naruto out at the market, but she trusted her student to look after her son. But as Shizen burst into the room with an unconscious Naruto in her arms, her world froze and she ran towards them. What happened? She yelled as Shizen fell to the ground, tears in her eyes before Tsunade crouched down and accepted Naruto from her. I don't know. Oh, 1 second, Naruchan was holding my hand as we were shopping, and the next he fell over unconscious. I dropped everything and I rushed over. Shizen choked out as she wiped her tears, the fear of something being wrong with the kid she saw as a little brother being too painful for her. Tsunade immediately kicked into her medic mode, running her mystical palm over him in search of anything that could have caused him to pass out. Was there anything on him or around him when he passed out, like a samban on the ground or anything? Tsunade asked, as there was no poison or anything in his system. Just this in his hand and these in his pocket, Shizen said as she handed Tsunade a half-eaten strawberry and 2 scrolls. I wasn't looking away from him for more than a second to place an order at the deli before he fell over. Oh god, I'm sorry, Lady Tsunade, Shizen choked out before Tsunade calmed her down by pulling her in for a hug. Sure, Shizen, you did nothing wrong and he isn't hurt, only asleep. The only thing worrying me is the fruit and how he ate it without you noticing, which makes me think a genjutsu might have been used, Tsunade said, calming Shizen down as her student hugged her tightly. Can you please take Naruchan to his room? I need to look over this fruit and scrolls you found on him. Can you also call Jiraiya back from his research at the bathhouse? Tsunade said, having a bit of a hiss at the end before Shizen, who had just finished wiping away her tears, nodded and gently picked up Naruto. Right away, Lady Tsunade, she said before walking off with Naruto in her arms, while Tsunade frowned and stood up. She didn't waste any more time before she hurried off to her office of sorts in this house and set down the scrolls on her desk with the strawberry next to it. She didn't need to waste the time analyzing it, as it was the wrong color, had odd designs on it, and its stem was irregular. Maybe these scrolls have something about it, she thought as she unrolled the scroll with the same markings as the supposed fruit, only to widen her eyes as she read what was in the scroll. This can't be true. This is just insane, Tsunade thought as she reread through it several times until she got to the point she lost track of the times she read it. Tsunade! A voice yelled behind her as the person groped her chest, snapping her out of her daze before she spun around and slammed her fist, out of instinct, into Jiraiya with a furious glare. Oh! What was that for? I was trying to get your attention since you didn't respond to anything else, Jiraiya yelled before she strengthened her glare. That doesn't mean cop a feel. Especially not when Naruchan passed out earlier today, she yelled before Jiraiya held his hands up in surrender. Sorry. I understand the seriousness and I'm sorry, he said as Tsunade sighed and sat back down at her desk, which made him let out a sigh of relief. Shizen told me what happened to the kid. Is that the fruit he ate? Was it poisoned? He asked as Tsunade shook her head and handed him the red swirled scroll. No, just read and tell me what you think, cause apparently that is what he ate, she said as Jiraiya rose an eyebrow but sat down on the ground and opened the scroll. While he read the scrolls, she poured them each a saucer of sake, which she passed to a shocked-looking Jiraiya, who downed it in one chug. This can't be true, Jiraiya said as Tsunade held up the bit of leftover fruit that Naruto had kept. From what is left over, it looks like this supposed Ope Ope no Mi fruit. I haven't read the other scroll yet, as I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this first, Tsunade said as she found it almost unbelievable. The Ope Ope no Mi, according to the scroll, was something called a paramecia-type devil fruit. She, in all her years, has never heard of anything remotely close to a devil fruit, but then again the elemental nations was full of odd things. What made her unsure of the fruit was the supposed power to have whoever ate it be able to create a space around them where they had complete control over the placement and orientation of everything inside. The applications and benefits a fruit like this could have under the control of a medic like her or any high-class surgeon were astronomical. It honestly made her all the more unsure of it, since it felt like someone gave it to Naruto knowing he was with her, someone who could train him to be a medic. So do you think he really ate it, or that this is even real? Jiraiya asked as he started to reread the scroll, holding up his saucer for a refill which she filled for him. I don't know. For now we consider it both real and fake until solid proof is shown, she said while Jiraiya nodded and sipped at the sake. Does this mean you are going to train him? Jiraiya asked in a low tone, knowing it was a sore topic for Tsunade given her fear of losing Naruto. I guess now I have to so I can at least make sure he doesn't end up accidentally using this perennial youth operation on someone accidentally. It goes without saying that that specific technique is never to be mentioned, not even to sensei. I will not have Orochimaru hunting down my son because of his desire to be immortal, she said with a deadly glare that Jiraiya nodded along to without even looking up at her. I agree, Tsunade. That is the last thing we need, he said before the door opened as Shizen stood at the door with head down. Lady Tsunade, I have laid down Naruto in his room. I would like to again apologize for allowing this to happen while I was watching him, Shizen said before Tsunade quickly pulled her into a hug. It isn't your fault, and I don't want you to blame yourself. Naruto isn't in any harm and he'll be fine or better than fine once he wakes up, so please don't be hard on yourself, Tsunade said before Shizen hugged her back and cried into her shoulder, relieved that Naruto was safe and okay. I'm going to go check on Naruto, so please if you can you go back to the market and get our food? Jiraiya, or a clone of Jiraiya, can you go along to help her? Tsunade said before turning to Jiraiya, who had already summoned a shadow clone in a henge, as was normal whenever he went into town to avoid being noticed. I'm going to read the next scroll to see what it says. When he wakes up, see what happened and how he got and ate this fruit, Jiraiya said as Tsunade nodded and rubbed Shizen's back before she and Jiraiya's clone left the house. Tsunade frowned as she walked to Naruto's room, after grabbing the remains of the fruit. She was still a bit shaken up from this scare, but she knew he wasn't in danger. It didn't mean she was happy with him eating this fruit, but it was better than him being poisoned or anything dangerous like that. She sighed as she sat on the edge of his bed, petting his head softly while she waited for him to wake up before he did start to finally stir after a minute or so. Naruto grumbled as he turned towards her with a frown, his eyes opening slowly before he saw her, and his frown changed to a smile. Mama! You'll never believe the dream I had about a fruit and an old man, he said before she frowned with a sigh. If the fruit looked like this, she said holding up the leftovers of the Ope Ope no Mi, then it wasn't a dream, she finished in a stern tone, making him frown, and stared down at the bed. You had me and Shizen worried sick. Shizen thought something had happened to you under her watch, and I was scared that you were in danger. I've told you many times not to take things from strangers or eat things given to you from strangers that myself or Shizen don't say if it is okay beforehand, she scolded him as he started to sniffle and cry. I'm sorry, Mama. I knew I wasn't supposed to be, but the old man knew my name, and this voice out of nowhere said I should. Naruto sobbed out while he tried to stop his tears as he was sad that he disappointed his mom and made both her and his sissy worry. Tsunade frowned as the voice out of nowhere comment made her worry about the Kyuubi, but decided, as she pulled her son in for a hug to comfort him, that she'd talk to Jiraiya about it later. Naruto-chan, I'm not mad, just I was terrified that something happened to you, she said as Naruto hugged her back, though due to the size of her chest, he was hugging her chest innocently instead while crying onto her shirt. I am sorry, Mama, he said, his voice muffled into her chest before she smiled softly and kissed the top of his head. It's okay, but I don't want this happening again, and you owe Shizen an apology as well. Now come on, your pervert of a godfather is worried about you as well, she said before she gently picked him up, moving him so he was crying into her shoulder before he nodded and wrapped his arms around her neck. Tsunade frowned as she watched Naruto cry and hug on Shizen, apologizing for making her worried as she sat next to Jiraiya. They were both a bit worried as they thought over everything that Naruto had told them. He says an old man gave him the fruit and a voice in his head told him to do it as well. You checked his seal, right? Tsunade asked as Jiraiya nodded. There is no way there can be any decay on it this early or at all. His seal is the strongest Jinchuriki seal out there. Plus there's the name of the old man, Hagoromo Otsutsuki. That is the name of the sage of the six paths in all recorded legends of him, Jiraiya said as Tsunade sighed and downed the saucer of sake in her hand, not being one to drink nearly as much as she used to with Naruto around, but after a day like this she needed a little extra. What did you find in the second scroll? She asked as Jiraiya rubbed his forehead with a groan. According to the scroll, the boy might have another power in him called Haki. Apparently it can allow its user to sense spiritual energy, use life force to defend oneself, and overpower enemies with your willpower. Those are the basic things, as sensing spiritual energy also acts like the Sharingan's ability to predict the movements of others, among other things, he said, already feeling a headache from everything this changed and could bring on for the young kid. I also looked over the Ope Ope no Mi's powers, and based on the notes made by Hagoromo himself, it might be best if later down the line we teach Naruto how to use a sword alongside being a medic and a surgeon, Jiraiya added, expecting a refusal from Tsunade only to get a nod from her. He'll use Kushina's sword and we'll look for a teacher, she said, not needing to even look at Jiraiya to know the somewhat shocked look on his face. You can stop looking at me like that. It's not surprising when you think about it. If he really has all of these powers, it would be more stupid if we didn't train him to handle them or use them. My main concern is keeping my son safe, Jiraiya. If training him ensures he won't die like Dan or Nawaki, then so be it, she said before she stood up and cracked her neck. We start really training him when he turns 6, giving us 10 years after that to get him to a level to ensure he will be safe. Until he becomes 6, we'll focus on awakening his chakra and chakra control. We'll both train him and he'll sign summoning contracts for both slugs and toads. You use your network to find a teacher to train him with a sword and we'll bring him here, Tsunade said, as if she was going to do this, then she was going to pull out all the stops, as this was one person she refused to lose. 4 years later, 8 years until Konoha. Tsunade watched with a stern eye as she overlooked Naruto's medic training, as for the last 2 years, ever since he turned 6, she had started him on his training and was impressed by how well he was able to progress. Early on in their training she had been open with him about everything, about the fruit, his latent Haki powers, and even being a Jinchuriki, all of which he had accepted better than they had thought. She also made it clear that he didn't have to, as she was not going to force him to do anything he didn't want to do. But thankfully it seemed being a medic was something he wanted to do, and the fruit only magnified it. You are doing really good, Naruto-chan. Your mystical palm is doing great, Shizen said as she watched Naruto focus on keeping a fish alive, something he had been doing for the last 5 minutes. Tsunade, at first, was a bit unsure how his chakra control would be with him being the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki as well as an Uzumaki. But to Jiraiya and her surprise, his chakra control was as good as any normal kid his age, or even better. It made them recall how the Kyuubi had told Naruto it would help him back with Hagoromo gave him the Ope Ope no Mi. Okay, but let's see how your room is coming along, Tsunade said as Naruto stopped his mystical palm and nodded before holding his open hand above the fish. Naruto closed his eyes as he focused his energy in his hand before a circle of what was best described as blue energy spun under his hand. It took a couple months at first to create, the first time being very difficult and taxing, but now he had gotten the hang of creating his room. Room, he said as the circle expanded from his hand, casting the area around him in a thin and faint layer of blue that always showed up inside the room. How does it feel? Tsunade asked as he smirked and shrugged his shoulders. It feels fine, Mom, not really like how it used to be where it was tiring to hold up. I think I even made it larger than last time, he said with a smile as every time he made a room they had him do it at this exact spot so they could track the size. Tsunade nodded, looking around the room for any signs of flickering, proof that it wasn't unstable, before turning to Shizen. Go check and see how far it reaches. Last time it was just out to the courtyard. Check the marker we have up, she said before Shizen nodded and went out to check. Don't push the size too much, Naruto. Focus on keeping it up and stable rather than further out. Once it becomes second nature, then you can spread it out. Better to have it stable than large right now, she warned him as he nodded before Shizen came back. It is a bit larger, at least by a yard or so. I moved the marker now, Shizen said while Tsunade nodded and turned back to him. Now I want you to amputate the fish, keep it alive and use tact to manipulate it before piecing it back together perfectly. This time, like the last couple times, I will not mark the fish. Amputate it in more than once, she said as he nodded and picked up the scalpel next to the fish. He didn't hesitate as he cut the fish into 3 pieces, its head, body, and tail. There was no blood from the cuts as his amputate ability allowed anything cut in the room without actually harming them. Tact, he said as he lifted 2 of his fingers upwards, causing the pieces of the fish to float into the air in front of him. Tact, alongside another technique of his called shambles, allowed him to manipulate anything inside his room. The others watched as the pieces floated in front of him, this exercise helping extend the length of time he can control tact while in his room. Over the years he had basic control over all of his powers, The only ones that he had true trouble with a few abilities, and the last one was more that he couldn't form it larger than a Samban needle. Okay, that has been 5 minutes, a good 2 more than last time. I don't want you to tire yourself out yet, as you still have Haki training with Jiraiya. Now all you have to do is piece them together, Tsunade said as he nodded and lowered the pieces of fish back so that they now hovered inches above the table. Naruto focused as he slowly made the pieces move closer before he had the head reattached with the body. He felt his forehead dampen a bit as he was focusing hard on lining them up correctly before he finally connected the tail with the rest. He let out a sigh, dispersing his room before his mom walked over to inspect the fish before she ran her mystical palm over the fish. He was a bit nervous before she nodded with a smile. You pass again, you lined it up greatly. None of the scales seem off like last time and everything inside the fish lines up and is reconnected as well. We'll move up to more pieces tomorrow, but you are progress greatly, she said as she kissed the top of his head, since while he might be training and growing he was still her son and little boy. Thanks, Mom. I've been working really hard, he said as she ruffled his hair with a chuckle. I can tell now, don't push yourself too far with Jiraiya as I don't want you to get too tired, she said before he nodded and left the room after giving her and Shizen a hug. He is really progressing greatly. I think he's well past needing to practice the mystical palm on a fish, Lady Tsunade, Shizen said as Tsunade nodded and sealed away the practice fish before rolling up the scroll. I know, but I don't want him using his fruit's powers on others yet, as he still needs to move up to it. I figure if the QB pitches in the burden will lessen, but from what Naruto has said I think he still needs to talk with it more before it sinks together with him, she said as Naruto's relationship with the QB was odd. The two of them had met a few months ago, and while it seemed less than thrilled about being sealed away, it did say it would lend him chakra once the two had connected. According to the QB, because he had only been in Naruto for 8 years, it wasn't enough time to connect their 2 chakra pathways or acclimate Naruto's to its chakra. It said that forcing the process would make Naruto lash out in rage, as the body of most Jinchuriki reacted in rage from the raw power of a Bijuu's chakra. For now Naruto could access a tailless cloak that could last for about 5 minutes. The Bijuu also mentioned how its other main focus would be negating his weakness to water by keeping his body energized, as it liked to put it, through the seal. Though by doing this it had unintentionally messed with his chakra nature, giving him not only his natural wind affinity but an insane water affinity, one that, through a message carried to them by Naruto, could theoretically make him how her great-uncle Tobirama was with water. I'm sure he'll grow even more as the days go by, and who knows, by the time he turns 16 he could very well become a medic on your level, Shizen said before Tsunade smiled and sat back down in her chair. A mother can only hope, she said as she knew he had a long road ahead of him when it came to his training. 2 years later, 6 years until Konoha. Naruto groaned as he dodged another paint pellet that Jiraiya and his clones fired at him through Samban launchers in an attempt to train his Haki, more specifically his Kenbunchaku Haki. It was the only of the 3 Haki that he had awakened so far. It more or less was, as Jiraiya put it, his observation Haki, and it allowed him to sense others, even those concealed or too far away, when he got better at it, as well as limited precognition, which was what Jiraiya was training right now. Over the last 2 years he had continued training under his mom, sister, and uncle. He had even signed the Slug and Toad contracts, the Slugs being mainly for helping his healing and Toads for combat. Mainly over the years he trained more in his fruit's powers, taijutsu, haki, and even some chakra exercises that would help him use wind and water jutsu. Another thing that had progressed over the years was his and the Kyuubi's connection, to where he could now use one tail of its chakra. This one tail was a major boost, especially when he channeled it into his devil fruit abilities to power them instead of summoning a cloak around him. Right now he was training in his speed alongside his Haki, as being able to see the attack ahead of time was only useful if he could dodge it. It was a bit difficult to see the attacks, as apparently it worked better with attacks that had murderous intentions behind them. Seeing as Jiraiya couldn't make it believable they were training him to sense any attack, hence why he was having trouble and being hit by so many of them. Okay, I think that's enough for today, Jiraiya said as he stopped, dispelled his clones and walked forward. What? I can do more, Naruto said as he still felt he had some energy left in him to continue for another 5 minutes or so. No can do, your mom hates it when I bruise you up too much. You are doing better though, as you are getting hit less and less each time we do this, Jiraiya said as he counted at least 10 less hits than last time. He knew it wasn't lucky dodges or him memorizing a pattern, as he always made sure he attacked with a different pattern than before. And relax, kid, you don't have to push yourself. You are 10 years old, no need to go crazy on the training. Now come on, go wash up before Tsunade yells at me for ruining your clothes, Jiraiya said as Naruto groaned but nodded before walking off towards the baths of the minor compound. Jiraiya chuckled as he was impressed by Naruto's progress, as not only had he dodged more of the hits but, from what he could see, the kid was in the process of awakening Bisashoku Haki or armament Haki to protect him a few times subconsciously. He noticed how a few times where the hits didn't leave a mark even though Naruto didn't dodge the pellet. It wasn't to the point of hardening, but it was enough to protect him from a few hits. The kid keeps surprising me, he thought with a chuckle before a slug appeared on his shoulder. Oh Lady Katsuyu, what can I do for you? He asked as the slug nodded. Milady needs Naruto-chan, apparently it's really important. The Raikage found Milady and is requesting her help but she is unable to, so she decided to call for Naruto-chan, Katsuyu said as Jiraiya frowned, not liking how a Kage from another village not only found them but was requesting her help. Should I come along with him or keep an eye on them? Jiraiya asked before Katsuyu shook her head. Milady said everything is fine as he seems more frantic to get the patient he brought healed than anything else, the boss slug summoned said as Jiraiya rose an eyebrow. Who is the patient? He wondered, since if it was enough to make a Kage get frantic it must be someone related to them. It's his niece, apparently the only blood-related family he has left, Katsuyu said while Jiraiya nodded with a frown, understanding the frantic attitude of the Kage. I'll send him as soon as he gets out. I'll tell him to hurry, shouldn't be too long, he said before she dispelled. Haim, what have you got yourself in this time, he thought with a sigh as he went off to tell Naruto he had to hurry, best not to keep a Kage waiting. -30 minutes later. Naruto frowned, a bit unsure why his mother called him down to the clinic his mother had set up in the town they lived in, deciding she might as well help around while she was there. It had also allowed him to practice on living people when it came to the mystical palm. Normally he either went with her in the morning or not at all, as she also didn't like interrupting his Haki training with Jiraiya. Are you Tsunade Senju's son? Akumo Anbu said before Naruto nodded, a bit unsure why an Anbu from one of the major ninja villages was in their small town. Please then come in, the Anbu said, slightly bowing as he moved away from the door, allowing him to walk in the room. This is your son, the medic you said could help my niece where you couldn't? He's as young as my niece. The man Naruto quickly figured to be the Raikage, by his outfit and appearance alone, yelled before his mom pinched the bridge of her nose and let out a sigh. Yes, and now let me explain. She yelled before the Raikage glared at her, although she was unaffected. I called my son because you wouldn't leave and demanded I save your niece, who has a condition that I cannot cure. My son on the other hand can cure, and if it gets you out of my hair before your being here causes too much trouble then I might as well call him, she said before turning towards him. Mom, what's going on here? Naruto asked as he was confused how he could cure something his mother couldn't. Though after thinking about it more his eyes widened as he came to understand what she meant. Wait, you want me to? Yes, she said, interrupting him as she sat down in her chair, Shizen standing beside her as the Raikage stayed standing beside the girl on the bed with a blonde-haired man next to him. I want you to use it, find out what is wrong with her and heal her. But before that, Raikage, I want you and your men to swear never to tell anyone what you are about to see, she said as the Raikage's bodyguard, a man named C, glared at her. Why should we? We owe you nothing, Konoha dogs, he said as Tsunade shrugged her shoulders. Then I guess the patient won't get cured. This isn't something you can negotiate. Either you agree to my terms or I send a message to my sensei, who is acting Hokage, she said as she had no problem threatening them, as her main concern, above all else, was her son's safety. The only reason she was even remotely going along with this was because how the Raikage was acting. He wasn't the stern and militarized thinking man that she had heard about, as right now he was a concerned uncle scared about losing his niece, as she was all he had left, something she could understand. You dare threaten, I'll do it, the Raikage said, interrupting C as he looked up at Tsunade. I, the fourth Raikage of Kumogakure, swear no one here will repeat anything they see. That goes for myself, C, and the ANBU outside. I don't care if the brat has the Sharingan, Byakugan, or whatever other thing that made you call him down. If he can save my niece, that is all I care about, the Raikage said, his tone cracking as he held the small hand of his niece as she laid sleeping on the bed. Good, now that we have an agreement, Naruto, make a room, she said as Naruto frowned before a nod from his mother told him it was okay. Over the 2 more years he had gotten to the point where making a room was like second nature. It no longer took that much energy to make or keep up, and he had extended it to the point that he could enclose the whole compound in it if he wanted to. Now scan her and figure out what is wrong. It should be obvious when you take a look, she said before he nodded and held out his hands in front of him. He took a calming breath, trying not to let the Raikage's gaze affect him before he channeled his fruit's energy into his hands and waved it across the room before he frowned as he looked over at his mom. She has tumors littered throughout her body. None of them seem cancerous, but they are still harming her, especially the one near her heart, he said before his mom nodded. She has 10 tumors. No doctor has been able to remove them due to where they are all located. The one near her heart is the most dangerous, as others were too afraid to try and remove them, the Raikage said as he sat down next to his niece's bed. Please, if you can, save her. I know Konoha and Kumo hasn't been on greatest terms, but she's my family. Besides my adopted brother, she is all I have. I've raised Mabui since her parents died in the Third Shinobi War, and I can't lose her now, he said before Naruto nodded. I'll do my best. I should be able to help her, but you will need to stand back as I need a lot of space, he said as A nodded and stepped back with a still glaring C stepping back with him. He frowned as he looked over the girl. She was undoubtedly pretty, and if he had to guess, a year older than him most likely. She had dark skin and light gray hair that went down to her shoulders with 2 bangs framing her face. Now please don't freak out at this next part, Raikage, but she will be fine, Naruto said before he furrowed and summoned a small Saban-sized constructive green energy from the tip of his finger. Take your time, Naruto. Go slowly and carefully with your gamma knives, Tsunade said as Naruto nodded and slowly inserted it into Mabui's stomach, where he could see the first tumor. Gamma knife was always the most difficult of his fruit's powers to manifest, but thankfully he could at least summon one without passing out afterwards. Didn't mean it wasn't still exhausting, but with the Kyuubi's help he should be able to keep this up for 9 more times. What is all of this? Is it some new Kekai Genkai? She asked before Tsunade frowned and rolled her eyes. It isn't a Kekai Genkai, it's more of something he acquired when he was young. For now be quiet and let my son work, Tsunade said as they watched Naruto, one after one, poke the gamma knives into Mabui throughout her body before only 1 tumor remained. He knew he had to be careful with this one since it was dangerously close to her heart. I'm going to have to use a technique of mine to make sure her heart isn't damaged in this, so please stay calm, Naruto said as the confused Raikage nodded before he slid his hand under Mabui's back, putting his hand ever where her heart was before he furrowed his brow and tapped her back. Mess, he said before, to the Raikage, and sees shock. Mabui's heart popped out of her chest, leaving behind a hole in her chest while her heart was encased in a glass case, still beating. What did you do to her? I yelled before Naruto held up her heart. Raikage, it is still beating and she's still alive. Mess is a power I have where I can remove someone's heart without actually harming them. It is still pumping blood through Mabui and keeping her alive. Removing this last tumor is the most difficult with her heart being so close to it. This way I don't have to worry about harming it. If you want, you can hold it to ensure nothing happens to it, he said as it gingerly accepted the glass-encased heart, allowing him to return focus to Mabui. With the heart out of the way, this made the last tumor much safer to handle and easier to access before he too got rid of it like the others, panting in slight exhaustion before he held his hand out towards A, asking for the heart back. I got them all removed so I can put her heart back in, he said before A nodded and handed him the heart again. Now this might wake her up, as inserting back in her heart might give her a jolt, and my mom can do her checkup then, he said before he placed her heart back into her in the correct orientation. He stepped back as Mabui's eyes shot open and she took a deep breath of air as if she had lost her breath, allowing the Raikage to rush to her side and check her over. You uncle? What's wrong? Mabui asked before her uncle hugged her close to him. Nothing, dear, everything is great. Your illness, it's gone, I cried out as Mabui also started crying as she hugged him back. Thank you, Tsunade-sama. Thank you, Mabui cried out before Tsunade shook her head. It wasn't me. Thank my son if anything, she said as she pointed towards Naruto, who was sitting next to Shizen, exhausted beyond belief as that was the most times he had ever created gamma knives in a row. It was also the first time he used mess on a human before, though he wasn't about to admit that to the Raikage. Why, you cured me? Mabui asked as Naruto weakly nodded. Yeah, but don't worry about it, I'm just happy to be of help you, he said before she got off the bed, with help from her uncle, and sat down on the ground in a deep bow. You saved me when no one else could. For that I promise to be of use to you and stay by your side. I will repay your act of generosity, Mabui said as both Tsunade and Naruto widened their eyes in shock. Wait, there is no need to do that. Honestly, Naruto said, unsure of how to react to all of this. No! I cannot sit idly by and not do anything in return when you saved my life. Uncle, please, you must let me stay with, she said before trailing off, realizing she didn't even know his name. Naruto, he said, making her smile and nod. You must let me stay with Naruto-sama to repay what he has done for me. My honor as a Kumogakure native depends on it. We do not let debts go unpaid, she said before Ace started laughing and pet his niece's head with a smile. If that is what you wish, then I cannot deny you it. But I'm sure some conditions will have to be set up beforehand, he said as Mabui smiled brightly and Tsunade went pale. Consider this an official alliance between the two nations, as I'm sure you wouldn't want to insult our village by denying my niece this or denying this alliance, Ace said before Tsunade groaned, knowing full well she can't deny this as much as she wanted to, since if she did it would make things even worse for the two nations. Why does my bad luck still screw me over, Tsunade thought as she swore it could be the only explanation why things were going like this. She just hoped this didn't turn out as bad as she was thinking it would. She could already feel a headache coming on as she watched the small girl that her son had just saved hug onto her tired son's arm with a warm smile. Okay, that's enough, Tsunade said as she pulled the two apart. Shizen, can you take Naruto and Mabui out of here? Raikage, you can send C with her, but we need to talk. Alone, she said as A nodded and motioned for C to go with them, leaving the two of them alone in the room. I know you must have some issues with this, but I hope you can have an open mind about it, Ace said while Tsunade sat down with a sigh. Open mind is a bit hard considering how your village in the past tried to kidnap an Uzumaki and a Hyuga in the past, and with the Hyuga your village demanded the body of the person who killed the kidnapper although you had no right. So I'm sorry if I'm very skeptical, she said as A frowned and sat down on the edge of the bed. I know my village in the past has made many mistakes, and the Hyuga incident has been one of my greatest regrets so far. The supporters of my father's strict reign devised the kidnapping event and whispered in the ear of the head ninja of Kumo to make him do what he had done. When I figured out what my elders had done, not only did I strip them of title and power, but I have tried my hardest to make up for it, he said, clenching his fists tightly before he reached into his pocket, pulled out a scroll, and handed it to her. For the last 7 years I have been carrying around this scroll in hopes to finally be able to return this body to Konoha and make amends. I refused to let them touch it after they tried to break the seal on his forehead. Now, with me meeting you and my niece becoming infatuated with your son, I hope this can allow me to atone for the sins of my nation and return this to you so you could return it to their clan and be given a proper burial, Ace said, surprising Tsunade immensely as she accepted the scroll. I know this doesn't immediately fix things, but with how my niece is dead set on staying with you, I hope this will allow things to slowly heal, A added as Tsunade pocketed the scroll and crossed her arms under her chest with a slight frown. This will mean a lot to the Hyuga clan, but I agree it will take time to fix things. Right now, though, I am more curious why you are allowing your niece, the only family you have, to stay by my son's side, Tsunade said, since she found it especially odd how he was willing to have her leave Kumo and stay with them. My niece has always been a quiet girl that rarely asked for anything or if she could have anything. She's been like this since her parents died, and for the first time I saw a fire in her eyes when she declared she wanted to stay by your boy's side, and I just couldn't deny her, Ace said while he looked up at Tsunade, a serious look in his eyes. So please think about this, and if you do decide to allow this, you will have Kumo and my full support if you are ever in need, said before Tsunade waved him off with a sigh. Fine, if she and you are so serious about this, then there is nothing I can do to stop this. That, and I know it's for the benefit of both sides at least, Tsunade said as she stood up, and A followed suit as he smiled at her. I am in your debt, Tsunade, for not only your son saving my niece but also you allowing my niece to be by his side, A said as he held out his hand for her to shake before she accepted it with a smirk. At least stay long enough to see her moved into my place and say goodbye to her, she said as A nodded before they both headed out of the room to see an exhausted Naruto in a waiting room chair with a smiling and perky Mabui sitting in the chair next to him, while Shizen and C were standing nearby. Uncle! So? Am I allowed to stay by Naruto-sama's side? Mabui asked as she looked up at her uncle with bright eyes that made the gruff Raikage chuckle as he nodded. Yes, though I won't be leaving you alone just yet, as I want to make sure you are settled in nicely before we leave, said before he quickly caught the hug from his excited and somewhat squealing niece as she hugged him tightly. Thank you, uncle. And don't worry, Naruto-sama. I will make sure I train hard so that I may be able to fight by your side, Mabui said as Naruto chuckled nervously, a bit unsure how to handle that the girl he saved was not only calling him Sama was going to live with them. Good, because the last thing I want is a fangirl to be beside my son, Tsunade said as she patted Naruto on his back with a smile. You did great, Naruto. Now let's just get back home so you can relax as the Raikage and I figure a few last things out about Mabui moving in, Tsunade added before Naruto nodded, and they all made their way towards their house. Once at the house, Naruto was quick to head to the baths to wash off the sweat that had caked onto him from using so many gamma knives as well as mess for the first time on a living person. Mabui though was more excited to be shown around the compound by Shizen, with C tagging along, allowing A and Tsunade to share a drink alone where she explained her situation. She was thankful though that Jiraiya was nowhere to be seen as it allowed her to have some more one-on-one talk with the Raikage. If Mabui is to stay by his side, I figure she would join him as a ninja, in which I'd hope to make her a Kumo representative and Kumo ninja as well to solidify things. Though it still depends on what the third Hokage says about this situation, A said as he shot back his saucer of sake before getting a refill. My sensei is a reasonable man, so he shouldn't have a problem if I explain everything to him, she said as A nodded. So is your son going to be a medic like you, or are you making him an all-around type shinobi? A asked before Tsunade sighed and set down her saucer. Medic is the main focus for him as well as taijutsu, but I also need to fight a kenjutsu teacher for him, as with his abilities it will be well suited for him, Tsunade said before A perked up with a smirk. I might be able to help given how, other than Kiri, Kumo has a handful of powerful swordsmen. That, and if needed I can use Kiri's allegiance to ask them if they have someone suited for him, A said as Tsunade nodded. Thanks, that'll be a major help when it comes to getting him ready and up to par by the time he turns 16, as long you keep us a secret for the most part, Tsunade said before an excited Mabui rushed back into the room with a huge smile. I love it here, uncle. I am going to love living here. She even helped unpack all my stuff into my room, Mabui said as A chuckled and got up, ruffling her hair with a chuckle before frowning as he noticed how low the sun was getting. I'm glad you like it here so much, but I think it is about time I start heading back, but before that I want to talk with you and give you some things, A said as Mabui nodded and followed her uncle out into the courtyard of the compound. The young girl didn't come back until a few minutes later and was holding 2 scrolls in her hands. With them being from the Raikage, she knew it would make the girl more than strong enough to make sure someone was watching her son's back. Well, I hope you're ready for everything up ahead, as if your uncle is putting you in my care and training I am going to make sure you can handle the world, Tsunade said as she eyed Mabui while sipping her sake. I am ready, Lady Tsunade. I will ensure I can stand beside Naruto-sama, Mabui said with such conviction that Tsunade couldn't help but chuckle. We start once you fully recover from everything, so be ready. For now you can help Shizen with dinner, Tsunade said before Mabui nodded and hurried off, making her somewhat look forward to the Kumo native and everything she had in her. 3 years later, 3 years until Konoha. Naruto let out another grunt of pain as he was tossed back by a powerful strike to his gut from the back of a sword. Over the last 2 years or so he had finally started kenjutsu training after Mabui's uncle came through on how he said he'd help them with a kenjutsu teacher. The man though hailed from Kiri and was told, according to rumors around the elemental nations, to be a natural master without any teacher. The main reason he was picked was because, like Naruto, he too had an insane water affinity. The man was Yamamoto Takeshi and a master of a sword style called Shiger Sonryu, which was hailed as an invincible sword style. It was also why he was a prime candidate to become a 7 swordsman of the mist according to the info Jiraiya's spy network had on him. When he first showed up, having given the info of what town they lived in by A after his mom was given the okay by Konoha, they expected someone fearsome looking. Instead though they were met with a man Shizen Nichin's age with spiky black hair, light brown eyes and a constant warm and cheerful smile on his face, even while in a spar. He mainly stuck to wearing kamishimo and hakama pants with his 2 sword sheaths sitting on his hips. Nice try there, Naruto, but you need to move quicker than that to get past your opponent's guard, Yamamoto said with a smile as he rested one of his 2 unique blades on his shoulder. It's hard to get close to you when you've already got my scent with that sword of yours, Naruto said, pointing his basic katana that Yamamoto had lent to him until he got his own from his mother once he turned 16, towards the sword in Yamamoto's left hand with the dog-shaped pommel. Yamamoto's 2 swords, one having a dog pommel and the other a swallow pommel, were a set that when used in unison was absolutely deadly and a true candidate to the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Oh, don't worry, Naruto, just consider this training with weights. If you can get a scratch on me, then that means you passed this level and we can move on to the next, Yamamoto said as he waved off his complaint, making Naruto groan before they both heard a boom of thunder. He worriedly turned around wanting to check up on Mabui, as she was the only one with an affinity towards lightning. It's okay, Naruto, Mabui is fine, as Tsunade told me to expect some noises as they are apparently making progress on teaching Mabui her super strength, the swordsman said, only making Naruto worry more as he knew how difficult, and at times painful, learning that technique of his mother's could be. Although deep down he knew Mabui could handle it. Mabui, while still quite clingy to him, was a skilled and powerful kunoichi. His mom had decided to teach her the basics of medical ninjutsu, but she had also realized her focus was mainly taijutsu, as her uncle had given her a rather powerful set of parting gifts. The main one that she was having the most trouble with was her uncle's lightning release, chakra mode, that she was determined to master enough to at least be able to use it in battle by the time they reached Konoha. He too had things he wanted to get some mastery over by the time they reached Konoha. Thankfully they were welcoming towards Mabui, enough not to refuse her passage into the village, after the Hokage explained things and returned the body of the Hyuga member that those going against the Raikage's wishes had demanded. All in all, he was a bit excited and a bit nervous to head there once he became 16. Excited because of the new people he'd meet and help with the training his mom gave him, and nervous about how they all will react to who his mom is and his powers. In the few years since curing Mabui's tumors, he had increased his control over his fruit even more, to the point he could create a room with minimal difficulty, and he could make it large enough to almost cover the entire town they lived in. Though they had done the test at night to hide the blue tint his room brought forth. His Haki training with Jiraiya had allowed him to get to the point he could use his Kenbunshoku Haka much easier to use, and he had even unlocked his Byusoshoku Heiki and some minor Byusoshoku Koka, a technique that hardened his body even more than normal Byusoshoku Haki. Although the most he could coat in it so far as was half of his forearms or half of his calves. Right now though, according to his mom, training in Kenjutsu and learning to use it in conjuncture with his fruit was the last step of his training besides elemental ninjutsu, both of which Yamamoto was teaching him. How about instead of getting a hit in on me, you show me at least one offensive and defensive stance starting now? Yamamoto quickly said before he charged at him with incredibly speed, leaving Naruto little to no time to react, immediately putting him on the defensive. Naruto gritted his teeth as he tried to use his Haki to help predict his teacher's movements, but while he could see them, he wasn't nearly fast enough to react in time. Thankfully, his Haki was also helping defend him against his attacks. Stop being so tentative and block better and attack for once, a familiar voice yelled out as Naruto grit his teeth and started, with help from the Kyuubi, started to summon water around him from the moisture in the air. Over the years, whenever he got the time, he meditated in an attempt to get closer to the beast he held inside him. The two of them got along well enough to the point the Kyuubi was willing to lend him a hand with his chakra much more willingly. They even worked together to the point he could handle 2 to 3 tails of his chakra without losing control. Shigure Ryu, second stance. Rolling rain, Naruto thought as he waved up the water around him with his sword, blocking Yamamoto's strikes before crouched down and dove through an opening in the walls of water. Now from defensive to offensive. The Kyuubi urged on as he went into his next stance, using the water walls as a mirrors to reflect his image. Shigure Ryu, ninth stance. Duplicate rain, he thought quickly as he used the mirrors as a distraction to attack from above, only for his sword to clash against Yamamoto's swallow pommel sword. Very good, Naruto. While it was a bit slow to gather water and create the walls for rolling rain, you moved into duplicate rain very skillfully. That should be enough for today. Tomorrow we'll work on your speed at drawing water and ways to fill your battlefield with it without wasting any time, Yamamoto said, his usual laid-back smile adorning his face as he ruffled Naruto's hair, making him groan but nod. Why don't you go check on your mom and girlfriend and see how they are doing, Yamamoto said, making Naruto blush a bit as he coughed into his fist, a bit caught off guard with the girlfriend comment. As she's not my girlfriend, as she's just someone that feels they owe me something due to me saving them, he said as he struggled not to slug his teacher as he started to laugh and pat him on the back repeatedly. Whatever you say, Naruto, I'm going to go take a dip in the hot springs and relax, Yamamoto said with a smile as he walked off, leaving Naruto alone before he started to walk off towards where his mom and Mabui were training. He has a point, kid. She is basically your girlfriend with how much she follows you around and hugs on your arm, the Kyuubi said as Naruto groaned and felt his cheeks heat up as he remembered how much she did that. a blush that only grew once he turned the corner and saw Mabui crouch down panting as she wiped sweat from her forehead. "Naruto-sama, are you done with your training?" Mabui asked, seemingly forgotten about her exhaustion as she ran over to him with a warm smile on her face. "Yeah, Yamamoto-sensei said I was done for today after a good few hours of training. How goes your training with my mom?" he asked as he saw smoking craters littered around the courtyard. "It went well, she's handling my strength better than I thought, and even more so in conjunction with the bits of lightning armor she can conjure," his mom said as she walked over with a smile before she ruffled Mabui's hair, which made the 13-year-old girl smile and blush at the compliment. "So where did Jiraiya train you like he was supposed to today at all, or was it all Yamamoto?" Tsunade asked as Naruto chuckled and rubbed the back of his neck with a sweat drop. "Well, he was there in the beginning of it but then ran out claiming a research emergency," he said as Tsunade groaned into the palm of her hand before she cracked her knuckles. "You two stay here and relax after training. I'm going to break his skull," she growled out as he chuckled and watched the ever-familiar sight of him mom going off to beat up his uncle for being a pervert. Or super pervert as Jiraiya himself always announced himself as. "I swear it is still surprising for one of the Sannin to be such a pervert," Mabui said as she remembered the first time she had taken a dip in the hot springs with Tsunade and Shizen, only for the medic to suddenly throw a small basin at the corner of the room, which resulted in Jiraiya falling from the ceiling. "I'm sorry that was your first meeting with him," he said as Mabui giggled and waved him off, patting his arm with a smile. "It is fine, Naruto-sama, as you got revenge for me by using your powers to swap his arms with his legs for the whole next day," she said as she remembered how Tsunade had used Jiraiya's punishment as a training exercise for him. "To be frank, I was going to do something like that to begin with after my mom told me what he did, as peeping on you is just messed up," he said with a light blush that grew as Mabui hugged his arm tightly with a big smile. "Well, I'm just glad I have you looking after me like that," she said as she hugged his arm tighter before letting go with a smile. "I promise though that by the time we move to Konoha I will be able to stand by your side and keep you safe as well," since she said before stopping and staring down at the floor before she shook her head. "Since what?" he asked as she looked up with a smile. "It's nothing, Naruto-sama, but if you want to know you'll have to wait until we make it to Konoha and we both pass the test," she said as she stuck out her tongue slightly before hurrying off, leaving him confused while the QB just laughed in his head. "Relax, kid, don't let it get to you. Just focus on training for the next few years and getting your powers fully under control," the QB said as Naruto frowned confused but nodded, as with only 3 years left. As long as that seemed, he knew it passed by faster than he figured, so he needed to stay on course with his training. 3 years later, finally to Konoha. Tsunade couldn't help but stare at her son from the doorway of his room as he continued packing and feel a mixture of pride and worry. She found it hard to believe that the little giggling baby she had brought home 16 years ago grew into what stood before her. Her boy was now easily 6 feet tall, his spiky blonde hair still defying gravity with 2 spiky bangs framing his face, and the sapphire eyes that looked over everything in his bag. His choice of outfits was nice, considering it was the outfit Shizen bought for his recent birthday. The outfit consisted of a pair of black sandals, dark blue cargo pants, a long-sleeved black shirt and an orange vest jacket with a black fur-lined hood. On each shoulder of his shirt bore the symbols of the clans of both his mothers, hers on his right and Kushina's on his left. Also around his neck and strapped to his waist were 2 very important items. Hanging from his neck was her grandfather's necklace, as she had finally decided to give to him, as for once it felt right where the necklace couldn't curse him. While her necklace was special, the item strapped to his waist was much more special, as it was his birth mother's sword, the same one she used to gain herself the title of Konoha's Crimson Shinigami. The blade itself was an odachi-length katana that was sheathed in a black sheath decorated with red circles split evenly into thirds. The hilt was wrapped in black silk with its tsuba had flower-like edges, and if he were to draw it he'd reveal its blade was pitch black with red ham decorating the blade to give it the appearance of a saw or sharp teeth. It was a legendary sword passed through the Uzumaki for generations before it was gifted to Kushina as she left Yuzushigakure as a kid, and its name was Shusui or Clear Autumn Water, and given Naruto's insane affinity towards water it all seemed to fit into place. This sword and necklace were the last 2 gifts of his given to him on his birthday a few months ago, and they were also used as a window to tell him who his real parents really were. Flashback. As Tsunade told Naruto the events around his birth, she couldn't help but feel a pit of fear rise in her stomach as she grew afraid of how he might react. I'm sorry I never told you this until now. I just felt now would be the best time considering we are leaving for Konoha soon, she said as Naruto looked up from the sword in his hands and smiled before surprising her with a hug. Mom, you will always be my mom in my eyes. You raised me, loved me, cared for me, and trained me my whole life. I am grateful that my birth mom chose you to look after me, as I'm somewhat afraid what would have happened to me if you hadn't. I love you and I will always see myself as your son, he said as Tsunade hugged him back with a smile as tears of joy silently streamed down her cheeks. Thank you, sweetie, this means so much to me. Just promise me you will be careful once you become a ninja, as I don't think I'd be able to handle losing you, she said as she kissed the top of his head, making him nod before she set her hands on his shoulders. And you can still back out of this and just stay a medic. Your training wouldn't go to waste, as I would have still trained you this much even if being a medic alone was your plan all along, she said while she looked her son dead in the eyes. Thanks, Mom, but I feel like I need to do this and that I can do this. I'll be fine, as Mabui-chan will always be watching my back, he said as he put his hands on top of hers and gave them a squeeze. I'll make you proud and put everything you taught me to use, I promise, he said before she chuckled and kissed his forehead. I'm already proud of you and I will continue to be with everything else you do from now on. Now how about we get back to the party, as you still need to eat some of the cake Shizen, Mabui and I baked, she said as Naruto nodded, slipping her necklace around his neck and carrying his sword in his hand. Sounds great, Mom, Naruto said as he and his mom left his room to go back and enjoy his 16th birthday party. Flashback end. You got everything packed and ready to go? She asked as her son looked over his shoulder with a smile before nodding and standing up, draping his bag over his shoulder. Yeah, I double-checked everything to make sure. Everything not mainly important is in the main scroll. I did though decide to keep the scroll keeping everything from my birth parents' house as well as the scrolls listing my powers, he said, as while she should have saved the scroll containing everything from Kushina and Minato's house for his birthday, she had instead given it to him after he had passed all of her, Jiraiya's and Yamamoto's tests. He had passed hers by showing the extent of his master over his fruit's power, his medical ninjutsu skills, and his ability to summon the slugs. He passed Jiraiya's by showing off his Haki skills, elemental ninjutsu, and the ability to summon the toads. And finally he had passed Yamamoto's tests by using all 11 stances of the Shiger Sonryu that he had shown Naruto, as well as his ability to summon water from thin air. While he might not have all of his fruit's powers or his Haki mastered, they were at a level where they felt he could easily defend himself. All in all, over in the past 3 years he was more than at the level of a Chunin due to their intense training over the years. That's smart for now, but once we get to Konoha, Jiraiya is going to put it in a sealed safe that opens only to your blood and chakra to keep it safe, since that scroll has the instructions for the Haraishin inside it. Plus I don't want your fruit's powers being leaked somehow, as he nodded and looked around the room once more. You know I'm going to miss this place considering how I've lived here my whole life so far, he said as Tsunade patted his back with a smile. I know what you mean, as I've learned to like this place, but the main Senju compound in Konoha isn't too different from here, she said before he nodded and followed her out of the room and towards the front door of the compound where Jiraiya, Shizen, Yamamoto, and Mabui were waiting for them. Did you make sure you didn't forget anything, Naruto-sama? She asked with a smile as Tsunade, as well as the other adults, hid their smirks as Naruto blushed slightly as Mabui moved closer to him. She knew her son well enough to know that puberty had hit him hard around 14 or so, and since then he had noticed Mabui as a girl, which they figured would happen sooner or later given how much she hugged on him, and how much she had blossomed over the last few years. In the past 3 years Mabui had grown some curves that came in the form of a rather full rear, from Tsunade had seen while they were in the hot springs, as well as a developing chest that was easily DD going on E-cup. All in all, they all had been trying to get the two kids together since it was clear Mabui had strong feelings for Naruto besides devotion, and Naruto, while a bit dense, had some budding feelings for her. Why yeah, sorry it took so long, Mabui-chan, he said as he rubbed the back of his neck with a chuckle as Mabui blushed, like she always did, at the addition of Chan to her name ever since he started adding it a year or two back. It is fine, Naruto-sama. I'm just excited to finally visit Konoha after all these years with you, she said with a smile as she hugged his arm, making Naruto blush darker before Jiraiya chuckled and clapped his hands. Well, lovebirds, let's get a move on. Sensei is waiting for us to arrive this afternoon, and we can't delay it as the academy graduation test is tomorrow, Jiraiya said as he ignored the glare from the 3 women around him. Yeah, I'm excited to see Konoha as well since I've never visited it before, Yamamoto said as he smiled, excited to go along as since he wasn't a shinobi or registered as one in Kiri he could go wherever he wanted as long as they were willing to allow him in. Okay, yeah, come on kids, Konoha isn't that far away so we won't be traveling long, but still the sooner we arrive the more time we have to get settled in, Tsunade said as everyone nodded and followed her lead out of town and towards the direction of Konoha. A few hours later, Naruto, as they walked up to the gates of Konoha, couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed from it all and the large city behind the gates as they walked in didn't help. Whoa, this place is huge, he muttered as Yamamoto let a whistle. You can say that again, he said before Tsunade smiled at the figure ahead of them. 16 years and you still look old as ever, sensei, she said as crossed her arms under her chest with a smile as she and Jiraiya stared down their elder sensei. It's great to see you too, Tsunade, as well as you, Jiraiya, Hiruzen said as he smiled, happy to have his two students back as well as have Naruto finally home, knowing from just one look the boy was something special. Thanks for watching this video. You really enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow HaretaSora for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.